Hey, hi, hello. Let's do it. You know what to do. Vocab section. You have but a mere 4 rows to add this time. So go ahead and add in 4 rows now. All right, let's get into it. Nice to have you along for the ride. So the first word I want to talk to you about, I actually want to talk to you about with this image here, because it's probably familiar to you. We're going to talk about plot. So plot is what happens. We'll get into a lot more detail about that later, but when you're talking about something like the hero's journey, for example, what happens is the plot. The hero's journey is a collection of plot patterns or plot archetypes. But I just want you to go ahead right now and think about what happens in the story. How do we establish it? How do we build up to the big turning point? What is the big turning point? How is it resolved? What have we learned from that experience? Take a moment and write out our term plot and our definition now. All right, welcome back. So something that's really important in plot is this concept of foreshadowing. So foreshadowing you also may have heard before, but I want it defined within the context of this class as a literary device, remember that, in which a writer gives an advanced hint of what is to come later in the story. So it's like a tool, right? And there's kind of two different types of foreshadowing, direct foreshadowing and indirect foreshadowing. So direct foreshadowing really clearly says what is going to happen. So this might be in some sort of a prophecy, right? Think about that call to adventure. Often an unusual birth involves a prophecy, and that might be really direct foreshadowing. Sometimes it's something that a character says, or something that the narrator says. Indirect instead might still involve dialogue, but it's going to be really casual and really small. If you are one of the folks that was like re-watching Spirited Away, you'd seen it before, you might have picked up on some indirect foreshadowing in the casual remarks between maybe Haku and Yubaba, right? This could also be shifts in setting. This could also be kind of tiny clues as you go along. Take a moment now and can you write down our definition for foreshadowing? All right, only 2 more, also potentially very familiar to you. Simile and metaphor, and I want to do them at the same time. So simile is an explicit, remember when we talked about implicit and explicit bias? Now we're really going to talk about implicit and explicit literary devices or tools that a writer can use. So a simile is an explicit comparison of two things, and we know that it's explicit because it uses a comparison word such as like or as or so or even than. Metaphor, on the other hand, is implicit. But let's take a look at an example right now. So an example simile might be, he was as quiet as a mouse. We're not saying he's a mouse, right? Instead, there's some sort of comparison word there. Now, a metaphor is going to be implicit comparison of two things by applying a word or phrase that's not literally applicable. Let's take a look back at our examples here. Metaphor, time is money. There's no comparison here. It's not a comparison. Instead, something is something else. Take a moment. You might even want to hit pause here and see if you can do a little simile metaphor bingo, right? As good as gold. Ooh, we've got a comparison there, right? Toddlers are rugrats. Is there any like, as, so, than? Nope, that one's going to be a metaphor. When you've picked out an example, you might even use this for your right-hand side column. Remember, you got to use that up. Can you go ahead and write out our definitions for simile and metaphor? And then you're done.